Welcome to Finance Leaders Retirement Insights, the broadcast where we sit down with thought leaders in the world of finance who reveal their unexpected wisdom on the issues impacting retirement.
Welcome to the Finance Leaders Podcast. This is the show where we highlight the stories, insights, and expertise of financial professionals making a lasting impact on their clients and the industry. Today, we have a pleasure of speaking with Mark Dorman, an experienced advisor specializing in enhancing the value of transferability of private and family-owned businesses. Mark is also the host of the Fish Big podcast, where he shares key strategies on exit planning and business transitions. Mark, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Mark, your journey from where you started becoming an expert in succession and exit planning must be an incredible. What was the specific moment or expertise that made you kind of realize that this is the path that you wanted to follow?
That's a great question. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. So I started in college as a financial advisor and was kind of quickly encouraged to go into the business marketplace. And at that time, financial planning, fee-based financial planning was just kind of taking off. I mean, you're going back a long, kind of a long way, like in the late 80s, and mutual funds were just kind of starting to come out and be all the rage. And, the folks that I hung around with, or my mentors, if you will, they encouraged me to go into the business marketplace for a number of different reasons. One, daytime activity, so we didn't have to work at night. This is back when your financial advisors would always come over to your house, so things have changed dramatically. And then two, like business owners have much more dynamic financial lives, more things to protect, more things at risk, more people depending on them for good decisions. And they also have bigger checkbooks. So I quickly just got involved in the business community, and I started out with really Main Street businesses. I mean, like the bakery, the dry cleaner, the guy with, two garages to fix cars, in the corner. And, by the time I was in my late 30s and early 40s, we had hundreds of clients, ranging from Main Street businesses to $500 million companies. And I just kind of grew into that. But what got me involved in the succession and exit transition planning was really my own business divorce, if you will. And it really caused me to rethink, wow, there's just so much I learned. We'd had a pretty significant employee benefits financial planning firm, retirement planning firm, and my partner and I had a disagreement, and that was my first exit from a business, and it was his first exit too. We kind of just pulled it apart, so that just caused me to reflect back on what I wanted to do. I was probably about 45 at the time, and started consulting with businesses on exit and transition, what I call business succession and transition planning. That's really what we do. Helping them get their hands around what their business is worth today, what their objectives are as it relates to their own retirement, their transition plan, succession plan. And I just fell in love with the space. I love the relationships that you develop with clients very, very quickly, and just at a completely different level of what I would say professional intimacy. You just know so much more about their business and their family, and their fears, their hopes, their dreams. And I also just came to a point in my career where I didn't want to be in a commodity-based business anymore. And that's really where the financial services industry, I'm sure you were in it. I mean, it just has become so commoditized and so much fee compression. I just didn't really find it to be that enjoyable anymore. And so I really kind of stuck with what I would call the retirement planning business and advocacy for our clients. So that would be in the States. I know you're up in Canada, 401k, profit sharing, cash balance plans. Again, a little bit more sophisticated. I like that stuff. Uh, Non-qualified benefit plans, business planning, but then a big chunk of what we do on the business development side is succession, exit, transition planning. So that's a long-winded answer, but that's how I
No,
got.
that was great. I mean, it covered a lot of different topics. So you maybe touched on it a little bit, but when you think about the work that you do with business owners, what's the most fulfilling part for you? I know when I was an advisor and working with business owners, sometimes it was just the sense of the relief that they felt, that they can see a clear path. What is it kind of for you when you work with your clients?
If I could you restate the question?
Like what is the kind of the fulfilling, like you doing this work with business owners? What is kind of the fulfillment for you, most fulfilling part of what you do with business owners? Like when you see them, when you meet them, they usually have some type of a challenge, or maybe they don't even see the challenge that they
Yeah,
have,
yeah,
and
that's
you
a great
start
question.
speaking with them, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what I've found, I mean, and it just happened again last week. You've got some very, very successful business owners that are, have, I wouldn't say, they have high net worths, and they're very good at what they do, whether it's manufacturing or service or what it might be. But when you ask them some general questions about business in general and planning, and they're so focused in on what they know that when you can when I talk to other people that are younger than me, I really kind of liken the business owner that that, let's say they're a boxer in the corner and their gloves are up like this, trying to protect themselves because everyone's after them. Everybody wants something from them, whether it's employees or families or communities or whatever. And if you can actually, what to me is the most satisfying, is if you can get them to drop their gloves and become vulnerable and say, look, I don't know what you're talking about this. I don't really know how to read my financial statements. I don't know how much I should have for retirement. I don't know what my business is worth. And when they say, can you help me? And you become their trusted advisor, to me, that's like the greatest victory of all time.
Yeah, you bring a great point. I mean, put it that way, even for me, and I think a lot of advisors, I work with them, I call them accidental business owners. They get into the business because they have a love and passion to do something, but they're so focused on becoming the kind of, you mentioned manufacturer, become the best manufacturer, but
Right.
they don't look at how to actually operate as a business owner and then really step back. And I can't remember which, I think Built to Sell was the book that I read, and it said in there like really the purpose of the business when you're going in shouldn't be like, what do I want the business to do? The first question should be, how do I get out of it? And that's kind of the last question most people that are in business, kind of think about. And I used to use this analogy that a lot of business owners, they think that they have built a business where it's got doors and windows and roof, where instead they find out when they're ready to exit that they build like a chimney, where it's literally this chimney going up like an industrial huge chimney with no doors, no windows, no nothing, and they kind of feel trapped in where they're at. So you worked with many different business owners. What's the common situation where you feel that they're stuck and uncertain, and how do you help them to kind of move forward with confidence?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of business owners are stuck. I mean, I think some of the best business owners I know, they're very, very uh, super, almost anal retentive, and they are very, very good at building this great business, but um, they're not really good strategic thinkers. They're not really good at stepping away from the canvas and saying, "Look, what are we trying to accomplish here?" Right? I mean, the goal is not to die with your boots on. The goal is to, leave a legacy, have the business continue beyond when you do, and really uh, getting them to open up about that is probably some of the most rewarding professional experiences I've ever had. One of the big turning moments when I went through this business divorce, and it was not, I mean, it was very unenjoyable, let's put it that way. But I happened to be going to Chicago to make a presentation shortly thereafter. So, we'd signed all the agreements, and so the divorce was over, so to speak. But what was very, just kind of hit me in the face, I kind of turned the corner, and there was a book called Finish Big, which is now the name of our podcast. And Finish Big is the title of a book written by a gentleman who's become a friend of mine called Bo Burlingham. And the subtitle is How Great Entrepreneurs Exit Their Companies on Top. And I quickly grabbed the book, and I had it read in about 2 days. And I called the author. I said, "This is crazy. I just went through this experience. This is what happened to me." "Oh yeah, that's pretty normal." And then I went back to Chicago to meet him because he was going to be speaking in about a month or two. And it just kind of changed the way I looked at things and felt that I had a bit of a gift, frankly. And that sounds somewhat egotistical, but I don't mean that. I don't mean it that way. I mean, I'm just very good at getting people to open up and express themselves and gain their confidence and trust, and something I really enjoy. But, really help them, understand what their options are, because most business owners don't even know how to unwind their business. They don't know what's the difference in this, planning if I want to sell to a third party, transition the business to my kids, transition it to key employees. In the United States, we have what's called employee stock ownership plans, if we want to look at those. So it's kind of looking at the options, understanding their current financial position. So that kind of brought back my whole financial planning background with business owners. So it's, kind of 1/3 financial planning, 2/3 business planning. That kind of what goes into the soup. And at the end, it's let's figure out what feels the best for you, right? And then the hard work begins. The hard work begins on making that business transferable. To your point earlier, Daniel, right? You've got to have a business that is transferable. And oftentimes those are very, very difficult conversations, because you've got to tell business owners, like, look, even though you're making $1 million a year, this business isn't really that attractive to anyone else, because, it's going to fall apart the minute you walk out the door. And those can be tough conversations to have.
Yeah. I remember when I was working with advisors and as an advisor with business owners, the one question that I would have when I would kind of do a family meeting, I would tell the business owner, go and sit in the corner over there. You're dead. You can't speak. And I would go and
Right.
ask the either family members or the members of his team, ask him some questions. And it was always fascinating how the business owner would always have all of the answers and everybody else didn't. But it's like, no, 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 Joe, you can't talk. You're dead. And make them realize, and what you just mentioned, to open up and start saying, hey, you are the business owner, but if you are the business, then when something happens or when you decide to leave, there is no business. And
Correct.
you work so hard building this asset, but really at the end, you are the asset. So you got to figure out how to make sure that you set things up. So when Mark, when you sit down with the business owner, what is the first thing, like when you sit down with somebody for the first time, how do you begin to help them to clarify their goals or uncover kind of the best direction for their business?
Um, I asked this question, kind of what's your home run scenario? I mean, if you were sitting there at your desk, Mr. Business Owner, and you said, "Hey, um, we're sitting here 15 years from now, what would have to happen for you to be very, very happy with the outcome?" Right? Whether you're 80 years old at the time, or you're, but would it be, and they'll start to tell you, well, I want to leave a good legacy. I want my kids to take over the business, or I really want to, maybe sell it, or I want to get the most money out of it. But it's really, what is your plan for the future? Getting them to really express their intentions. And I'll tell you that for most business owners, they're like a deer in the headlights when you ask them these questions, because really no one's ever asked them the questions before, right? This is the stuff they think about, like, what in the world am I going to do with this business? Or their wives or their spouses or partners will say, "Geez, honey, what if something happens to you? What's going to happen to the business? And am I going to be okay?" There's a lot of unanswered questions out there. So what we try to do is really take them through a process of, helping them to discover, what's important to them and why, what their business is worth, truly what's it really worth, not what they think it's worth or what they've been told it's worth by people at the golf club. And what their expectations are in terms of timeline, how much longer they want to work. And if they can answer those three questions, then, we can walk them through a process that helps to kind of unpack all that, um, and let them know that if you don't have answers today, that's fine. You're not alone. 99% of business owners can't answer these questions, but we just got to start kind of picking away at this process. And then if you're sitting there from 6 months, they'll say, I didn't know that my business was worth more than I thought, or it's not worth as much as I thought, or selling it to my key employees was an option, even though they don't have any money. I mean, these are all the things that we discuss throughout this process.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it is a process, and sometimes just getting started, I think, is the biggest thing, and having them open up and start sharing with them. What I find sometimes, instead of asking, what do you want, is start asking people what they don't want, because that's kind of the
That's a good
easier
question.
path sometimes to getting the answers, because that's what we're experiencing. When you start asking somebody what they want in the future, they can't even imagine it, and I think that's sometimes difficult. I know one of the things, I was working with a client that was looking at to sell his business, and he told me he had really hard time with it because he started it in, doing it in his garage, building it all up. And he said, Daniel, like, selling this business, I feel like I'm divorcing one of my kids, or I'm cutting off my right arm. Like, it's just such a almost traumatic experience that he was going through.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, it really took him some time to start to get used to the idea that he's not going to have to wake up and go and do this and
Yeah.
go to the office, kind of a thing. So, and I find a lot of entrepreneurs, they, if they go and get out of one business, they usually start another one fairly quickly, no matter what their age is. But so from the perspective, do you have some stories, with some of the clients that you have worked with, that you could
Yeah,
really
I mean,
help them?
without question. I mean, there's a couple things you touched on. So going back to this book, Finish Big, which I would highly recommend to your listening audience. The second chapter is entitled "If I'm Not My Business, Then Who Am I?" And it tells the story about a gentleman who sells. He's kind of the big man in town, and then he sells his business, and guess what? No one talks to him anymore. No one calls him. No, his Rolex is dried up. His sense of identity is completely gone, and he goes into a pretty severe depression. Um, and this is not unusual. So it's this whole thought about really in this process when you're working with really qualified advisors in this space is you have to have somewhere to go to, right? If you're leaving, um, playing golf every day is not really a reasonable plan. Neither is fishing. But really give some thought as to what is your day going to look like should you retire. And within that book are many, many elements that are outlined of what a successful exit look like. And, for a lot of business men and women, I would say for the vast majority, getting the most money for your business is not their number one priority. It's really, having a peace of mind, being at peace with people who help you get there along the way, that maybe the business is doing better than it was before, um, and that you were a good steward of the business while you were there. With regard to stories, I mean, sure, we've got plenty of stories. I remember we've got a company down in Southern Ohio. They're in the food manufacturing business, third generation. And I said, well, what's your biggest fear to the owner? And he says, my biggest fear is that this business falls apart on my watch. My wife's grandparents started it, then her parents ran it, now we run it, and I'm deathly afraid I'm going to screw this up. I mean, that was really what kept him up at night. It wasn't about the money. What it was about, I don't want this thing to just fall apart while, I'm the president of the business. And that's how much pressure that they really feel, uh, and they internalize. Um, in addition to that, we've had terrific success stories that we've worked with of, navigating the family dynamics that exist within privately held businesses. If it's son number one or daughter number one or son number two should get the business, bringing in outside professionals to help navigate that. So it goes way beyond the financial professionals or the business people. It's maybe some psychologists, business, family, dealing with the family dynamics within a business or become very critical. But, when you get all the parties, at peace with one another, they feel like they've been treated fairly. and that they'll still have Christmas together. That is very, very, um, that's very rewarding. And then unfortunately, we've also had outcomes that haven't worked out well. I mean, I'll never forget, we had a case in outside of Erie, Pennsylvania, where the owner was so excited he was going to give his key employee the keys to the business and let him buy it off him at a discounted price, and um, set up a dinner with the key employee and his wife. And he said, John, I want to congratulations. I'm going to sell you the business. And John's wife says, there ain't no way my husband and I are buying your business. So now he's left hanging
Yeah.
with this big company, assuming all along that, well, who wouldn't want, this
Yeah.
business? And um, so he had to start over, and that business ended up closing its door because by the time, he had delayed that conversation and just made some assumptions, and it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Making an assumption on some of these things, it can be quite detrimental, and that's unfortunately an example of what can happen. And I
Yeah.
think part of it, and you mentioned on that, you're a big proponent of collaborating with other professionals on the owner's team. Can you share some examples how this kind of collaborative approach made a real difference in achieving clients' goal?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and I could give you countless examples, but let me just say this. I think that our methodology is very, very collaborative, but that's not to say that all the professionals that we encounter are collaborative, right? And I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You extend an olive branch saying, "Hey, our client wants to do this," and I've been asked to kind of quarterback it, and you're very polite about it. And then the next thing you know, the attorney or the accountant is going to try to, arm wrestle you for control of the microphone. And that promotes, you know, leads to some negative outcomes. Positive stories have been, really happen quite often when you can get with other collaborative professionals who really appreciate the spirit of collaboration, and you can sit with an owner and kind of have these kind of well, what if we did this, these dreamscapes where what if we did this, or you could do that as well. And you have the CPA, the banker, the attorney, uh, the financial professional, or the exit planner weighing in, and it leads to the greatest of all outcomes for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's often difficult. I know when I got my CFP and I try to go and put it, everybody around one table, and it's like saying and making the client understand that sometimes you may have two or three or four different professionals, and they're actually inadvertently, sometimes inadvertently, competing with each other.
Yeah.
Because you go and listen to one guy and he tells you something, right? The stockbroker or the investment guy is going to tell you something. Insurance guy is going to say something completely different. Then you got a mortgage broker or somebody else, and now everybody's like competing with each other instead of saying like, hey, let's just go together. I kind of have the saying that 50% of a watermelon is always more than 100% of a grape. And I think this is where
Gotcha.
it's up to the client to help to facilitate that, because I think, like you said, you might have the best intentions, but you kind of have to get the client, I think, on your side saying like, hey, let's collaborate, let's go and do this together. You may find out that some of your other advisors might feel threatened by this, but you got to kind of thaw out the ice a little bit, saying like, hey, we're here, the client, we want to go and make sure that the client gets the best outcome on this. We have to go and work together. But yeah,
I mean,
unfortunately,
there's no question about it. I mean, you
yeah,
find out that, I mean, and I'm sure you've been in client meetings. I mean, I've had a client down in Southern Ohio. The first time his accountant and his attorney ever met each other after being in business for 25 years was when we said, can we have a meeting with your attorney and your accountant?
wow.
Um, and, he's like, well, my guys really, I said, you got to kind of close the door and say, these guys don't even know anything about your business because you're sending them financials. They finish them up. You call your attorney when you need them, but you never really have any strategy sessions about what the future of the business is going to look like. And if they can't play nice in the sandbox, then we've got to find other advisors who will.
Yeah, and again, that's the unfortunate thing, and I think this is what becomes scary for a lot of maybe subconsciously business owners. They don't want to go there because they know it creates more work, but they don't understand how important it is if they do want to go and have a successful exit out of their business.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Your Finish Big podcast dives deep into the transition process for business owners. What's and we talked about different stories. Is there like one key story or lesson from the conversations that really stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole theme of Bo Burlingham's book, um, and I would suggest you reach out to Bo if you need his contact information. He'd be a great guy to have in your podcast. But really, the biggest takeaway in that book is, the quicker you start, the better the outcome, right? The quicker you start this process, the better the outcome. That means you can't have a good out. It doesn't mean that you may not have a good outcome. But what the resounding theme is, look, the sooner you start on working on your business with kind of the end in mind, to quote Built to Sell and John Warlow, then the chances of a successful outcome increase dramatically. And the worst thing that could happen is you'll have a better business in that it'll be more valuable. It'll be more fun to operate. Maybe you'll have less stress, etc. Right? So that is because I get that question. I do a lot of speaking. Is well, how soon should I start? And I'm like, well, as soon as you can, right? Yesterday, because raise your hand if you want your business to be less stressful and more valuable, right? And everyone's hand goes up. Yeah, the other thing that just is crazy that we see all the time, and one of my good friends is the CEO of a company called Biz Equity. They're the largest online business valuation firm in the world. But their research indicates that 98% of all business owners don't know what their business is worth. I mean, that's almost 100%.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is in Canada, Daniel, but I mean, the reason why most American business owners fail to know what their business is worth, I mean, besides the fact that they're running around, putting fires out all the time, is that it's normally a very expensive process. $15,000 to $20,000 maybe, takes a ton of time. They get really annoyed with all the questions, etc. But we're of the opinion that you ought to know what your business is worth, how to treat it like an asset, how to make it worth more, where to avoid, what to avoid to lessen the value, whether it's, to your point, owner concentration, customer concentration, etc. But it just strikes me as very odd that anyone in the world can tell you what they've got in their Charles Schwab account or their Toronto Dominion Bank account online, but they can't tell me what their business is worth when it's probably 90% of their net worth, right?
Yeah. And it's detrimental. I don't know if you've heard of there was a marketing program that was part of called the Business Killers, and that was one of the questions. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but what is your business worth? And a lot of, unfortunately, business owners, they're uninformed, but that has a huge impact if something happens, as far as with the business owner. If they're a partnership and one of the partners dies, that affects the valuations and everything, and the buyout and everything that will happen with it. So it's really important to be informed.
Yep, no question about it. I mean, I know how you can't really plan if you don't know what it's worth. If you don't know, you need to know how much you need to retire upon. When you retire, how much income you're going to need, how much of that's going to be dependent upon the value of your business or the value of maybe the real estate that you have as a result of owning the business. So you got all this kind of stuff coming at you, and someone's got to help you prioritize, manage, and hold you accountable to that process, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, 100%. So, when you're working with business owners and they kind of feel overwhelmed, or if you're talking to business owners right now, starting to think about the exit or succession plan, how do you help them to kind of take that first step, or what is that first step?
I think I think what I've found to be probably the most successful and what I would say the least invasive is we have an assessment tool. A friend of mine runs a company called Value Compass, and it's an assessment called Discover. And Chuck Richards, he went to MIT, which is a pretty good school in America. And if a business owner knows their revenue and their EBITDA or net operating profit, one of the two, if they know that little financial information, what are my sales and what's my, free cash flow, if you will, then, and their industry code, they can say I'm in construction or I'm in accountancy or whatever it might be, then we can then provide them, we'll ask them about 18 additional questions about their business, not the financial, but about their business, the qualitative elements that are found in good business along the lines of, customer concentration and owner centricity and things like that, to try to identify detractors of value or additives to value. But we can produce in about 15 to 20 minutes a 5-page report that says, hey, Daniel, you've got revenue of 5 million, you've got EBITDA of maybe 800,000, your business is worth maybe 3.2 million, but it could be worth and should be worth closer to maybe 4 million. So that tends to get business owners' attention when you say, because they're very competitive individuals, right? Well, what do you mean my business is worth 3 million, but it could be worth 4, right? Let me see that, right? And now they're engaged because now the game's on. It's a game, right?
Yeah.
And we can identify, well, here's where you need some help. And they're like, oh, I've never seen this before. What's the next step? And then we're off and running with some good dialogue there.
Yeah. Like I said, it's again cracking them open and start having the conversation. So, what do you find is this kind of the single biggest challenge that most business owners face when preparing for succession planning, and how do you help them to break through those barriers?
I think inertia is the biggest, without question. Is getting their attention, and really getting them to drop their gloves and become vulnerable. They're very, very good at kicking this can down the road, right? They don't want to deal with it. They don't know how to deal with it. There's a massive admission sometimes that their financial house is not in good order outside the business, that their personal estate plan's not in good order, that there's a bunch of things they just haven't done, and they don't really want to tell anyone that, stand in front of the doctor and step on the scale and they're like 40 pounds overweight. They don't want to have that conversation, right?
You just remind me of something. I was in a workshop. There was probably around, I don't know, 200, 300 business owners. We were all there kind of learning about things. And the speaker came on and says, okay, you know what? Right now, I want you to go and write in your journal and answer this question. What's the one thing that I don't want anybody to know about my business? That was a fairly interesting thing.
Yeah.
So at the end of it, everybody wrote it down. The conference went on, and then they set us all around the table, and we were around the table. It was about 10 people. I was the third one to go, and everybody started reading the question. When it came to me, and I just started laughing, I said, everybody answered the same thing. I said, everybody pretty well answered, I don't want anybody to know that literally every day I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I am pretending like I've got it all, I know everything, but I don't. Right?
Yeah.
And I think, and everybody answered the same way. And it's kind of like, why do business owners feel like they've got to hide it? I mean, we're all going through this, and I'm not saying there aren't, business owners that have sought help and they know what's going on, but a lot of people feel like they have to hide, right?
Well,
In
yeah,
front of everybody else.
I think, yeah, I don't know if you've ever had any experience with peer groups or anything like that. And that's the power of the peer group, is the sense of security, becoming vulnerable. Like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes I'm just winging it. Well, I mean, isn't that true of all of us? If, I tell them, I've got 4 kids. I mean, when I was a young dad, I'm like, I'm just doing the best I can. There's really no manual on how to do this, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, it is hard, and I think with social media it became even harder, because let me tell you, all you ever see is the 10-second reel of I'm so happy, right? You don't see what happens after that. You don't see the struggles and everything, and one of my coaches, he said, you want to see overnight success? I'll show you the 40-year overnight success that I accomplished.
Exactly.
It took me 40 years to get here. It didn't happen overnight. To you looking from outside, it might seem like, oh, something just clicked and everything was perfect. No, you don't see all the things that didn't work. All you ever see all the things that did work, right?
Yeah,
so I
you've
think
seen
that's
that. You've seen that graphic of a pyramid that shows, the overnight success, and it's the tip of the iceberg that says success at
Yeah.
the bottom, but it shows all the
Okay.
failures and the bad mistakes and this bad bank deal and this bad deal and lost this. I
Yeah.
mean, and then all of a sudden, oh, that guy's he makes it look so easy. You're like, yeah, right, So,
It's just the perception, unfortunately. So, and I think that's where it becomes important for you as an advisor coming to somebody and breaking that down and saying like, hey, we are all in the same boat, right? But hey, this is not about me or anybody else. This is about you and what you want with your business, right? So I think a lot of business owners kind of have the misconception about what succession planning really involves, right? So when you kind of meet with somebody, what's the biggest misunderstanding you come across, and how do you help clients to kind of see things differently? And we just kind of mentioned a little bit in here that they're afraid to go and share stuff, but what do you see?
well, I mean, I think that as I've gotten older, it's become a little bit easier because you've got more stories to share. And it's like if you don't do a plan, if you don't do some planning with regard to the future of your business, the transition of your business, the unwinding of your business affairs, then the government and fate has a plan for you. And I don't really think most business owners, they're such control freaks, um, as we all are, that you say, well, I really don't want, I'd rather have a stake in the outcome versus just kind of winging it, right? But I mean, I can tell you that some of my best clients, that it's just getting their attention, right? I mean, I bumped into a young guy. He says, I really like to meet with you. Well, this was 9 weeks ago, and we've been trying to have a coffee meeting ever since. And every week I'm told next week will be better. Next week's never better. They still don't have time because the very thing that's preventing them from doing the planning is preventing them from just having a cup of coffee with me at a
Yeah,
Starbucks on a Tuesday morning to say, here's how we can help you, right? We can help
yeah,
make your life a little bit more enjoyable.
yeah. No, but what most business owners don't realize that they might think, hey, you know what? And I ask this question often, what's your biggest expense? And they start saying, well, you know what, my mortgage, or when it comes down to the business, like purchasing stuff, or they might say taxes. And I said, no, unfortunately, the biggest expense you have right now is the cost, or I'll put it this way, is the revenue between what you're making right now and what you ideally want to be making, right? So I'm just, for simplicity of numbers, if somebody's, has a revenue of $1 million, right? And they want to go to $2 million, right? Well, not knowing how to go from one to two, it's already costing them $1 million. Right. And now we're talking about just time sitting down with you and just going and looking at some strategies. It is invaluable, sitting down with somebody and just having that little bit different perspective,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the books that changed my life after I was got my CFP designation in, what was it, 2009, was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in there, I'm studying for CFP, and it tells me my house is the biggest asset. And there was Robert telling me, but my house is the biggest liability that I own. And I'm like, hold on, this doesn't make sense. And his whole idea of saying that, hey, you know what, an asset is only an asset if it has a cash flow flowing through it. And again, that changed my whole perspective. Instead of just looking at it as kind of the whole financial industry talks about save, 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 the other idea is how do we create more? How do we be more creative with the things that we have? So
Correct.
it's all about changing those mindsets. But I know you mentioned that your parents, are Scottish immigrants, and you know, family that you've had. How have those personal experiences, looking at your family and how important it is, kind of shaped the way that you think about legacy, both for yourself and your clients?
That's a great question. I mean, that's probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked in my life. I mean, I've got 4 kids. I've got three sons, 32 from 32 to 24, and then my daughter's 21. And my dad was my mom and dad are immigrants from Scotland, and not the least bit entrepreneurial at all. And I'm very entrepreneurial. I've owned multiple businesses, and uh, work ethic is certainly something that I saw with my mom and dad. High levels of character. I mean, my culture is something that's very, very important to me. I'm very proud to be Scottish, and you can ask my friends. They see me with my Scottish head covers on my golf bag and all this stuff. But if you're going to do something, do it right, right? That's one thing. But I have come to know that like the wealthiest people, and I'm not, and I when I say wealthy, I'm talking like not only financially, but the most financially secure people and the people that I've known to have the most freedom in their lives, the ability to travel, ability to do things in the community, give back, take time to spend time with their grandchildren. No, it's not true. Not some choose not to do that, but are people that own their own businesses. So I've always just taken that and say, well, you know, you can't really make I don't know that you can make a great, you can't really build a lot of wealth and have a lot of financial freedom if you're getting paid by the hour. You've got to figure out a way to scale your time, own an asset. If you can, I try to tell my kids, look, if you can own a business that you get paid a salary, let's say 100,000 a year to run as an example, but in 20 years it's now worth $3 million. I mean, you've tricked the system, right? Because some people will make 100,000 and then end up with nothing. They
Yeah.
don't have an asset. So I'm always just trying to teach my kids like you got to be in control and not, they don't need to have a glass ceiling on your income, and you should be trying to build assets and create wealth, right?
It's really working. I think what you're mentioning is building life and business on principles as opposed to tactics and strategies, because principles are universal and they work all the time. And I think this is where that was what I kind of learned the whole concept from Robert. It's like, hey, you know what is the true definition of an asset? And again, I was in the financial industry. I thought I knew it, but he redefined it for me, and that completely changed what and how I looked at it. I mentioned to you, I kind of looked at myself as an accidental business owner. And when I look at most financial advisors, I think they all are accidental business owners because they're so busy of becoming the best advisor they can be, not understanding that they're actually running a business as a financial advisor. And most of them don't kind of look at where they're at. So when you look at ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, what's your big vision for your business? What impact do you hope to make? And, what are some of the exciting goals that you're working on towards?
So, we're trying to positively impact people's lives, and two from, really retirement preparedness. So, the one business that I'm involved in, we do retirement planning, 401k advisory services, and we really take it serious, like try to get people to save more money, right? Uh, that sometimes is like beating our head against the wall, but so that's one area. But what I'm probably most passionate about would be this whole successful transition and understanding outcomes. And, if we can, if in 10 years we've worked with 300 more businesses, uh, hopefully most have had successful outcomes, then I think that would be a hell of a good career. That's the way I look at it, right? And build a team that is sustainable. So when I'm kind of eating my own porridge, so to speak, trying to build our business with the intention of having a CRM, having something that's of value, having intellectual property that is transferable, building a model, having a process, all these things that you didn't do when you were 30, that you could have gotten paid for more money, right?
Yeah.
So
So you're saying you're working on your own succession plan and
absolutely.
having that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people will ask you, right? And you say, well,
Yeah.
let me show you what I've done, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so yes, absolutely.
No, exactly. So listen, as we're closing here, how can listeners really learn more about the work that you do and get in touch with you if they're interested in your services and
Well,
having
and
that first conversation?
that's great, great question. So you can go to our website is succession.plus/US. You can check me out on LinkedIn, Mark J, as in Joseph, Dorman, Dorman. Or you could certainly shoot me an email at mdorman, Dorman, at succession.plus.
All right, Mark, that's awesome, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the Finance Leaders podcast, and I'm sure our listeners have gained valuable takeaways about really what succession planning is and maximizing the value of their business. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Finance Leaders podcast for more conversations with thought leaders shaping the financial industry. Until next time, take care and keep building your financial future on solid biblical principles.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Finance Leaders Retirement Insights.